The Wyoming wind whipped my face, carrying grit in the tang of sweat. Dust devils danced between the towering pines, a constant reminder of the unforgiving landscape we were filming in. Out on the dusty plain, hundreds of extras milled about, their covered wagons, a makeshift town for the next few weeks. This was Hollywood, 1930. Miles from any soundstage, and I, a greenhorn grip on my first big picture, the big trail. Back then, John Wayne wasn't Duke yet. He was Duke Morrison, a scrappy kid with a jawline that could cut glass and a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. He wasn't a star, not yet. He was our lead, Breck Coleman, a wrangler thrust into the role of a lifetime. I first saw him during a stunt rehearsal. A horse went crazy, rearing up and threatening to throw its rider. The stunt double bailed, but the Duke, all raw nerve and determination, clung on. The beast bucked and twisted, a whirlwind of brown hide and flying hooves. My breath caught my throat. Sure, he was a goner. But then, with a yank of the reins and a mighty shout, Duke brought the horse under control. The crew erupted in cheers, the sound echoing through the valley. There was a fire in his eyes that day, a hunger that promised greatness. Days on set were a blur of long hours and backbreaking work. We hauled equipment over treacherous terrain, battling the elements and the ever-present mosquitoes. Duke was always there, leading by example. He'd haul cables with the best of us, a quip always on his lips. Even when exhaustion painted lines across his face, he had a way of making you feel like you were part of something bigger, a grand adventure unfolding before our very eyes. One evening, huddled around a crackling campfire, guitars strumming under a sky ablaze with stars, Duke sang. His voice, rough-edged but filled with a quiet strength, resonated with a yearning for something more. We all felt it. The dreamers and the drifters who made up this traveling circus we called a film crew. We were chasing our own piece of the American dream, out here on the edge of nowhere. The Big Trail wasn't a box office success, but for those of us who were there, it was a baptism by fire. And John Wayne? He wasn't Duke yet, but the seeds of that persona were firmly planted. The grit, the determination, the twinkle in his eye. They all shone through. Years later, when I saw him on the silver screen, a steely glint in his steely glaze. I saw not a movie star, but the young wrangler who tamed a wild horse and stole our hearts under the endless Wyoming sky. Welcome to Talk with History. I'm your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jenn.
Hello.
On this podcast, we give you insights to our history-inspired world travels, YouTube channel journey, and examine history through deeper conversations with the curious, the explorers, and the history lovers out there. Now, Jenn, this is our second podcast back from an extended break, and we had asked some folks to write in saying, hey, what's your favorite podcast episode? Because we do love hearing that. And I actually got an email from Hannah. She had actually written us back in mid-May, but it ended up in my spam folder. So sorry about that, Hannah, but I found it. I replied back, but she said, hey, I love both your channel and your podcast. My favorite podcast is probably The Women of Bull Run. I like how not only men join the fight, but also women as well. So I thought that was really cool because that was a fun kind of place for us to visit when we went to Manassas. We went to the Battle of Bull Run, and we gave a different perspective on that. So thank you, Hannah, for the email. We really enjoy and appreciate that feedback. We also got, I want to give Kenneth a shout out. He actually donated to the channel over at walkwithhistorygiftshop.com. So if you ever go over there, you can see t-shirts we have, different things that we have on the gift shop. There's some really fun stuff that we've created over there, and some I think especially the history or die one. And if you donate, then we'll give you a shout out. So thank you, Kenneth.
Thank you, Kenneth.
All right, so Jenn, as our listeners just heard in like the Act 1 kind of vignette that I had, we're talking about John Wayne. He started his career really in 1930, right? That was one of his first movies.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, he had been a USC football player, hurt his knee, and basically just started working in the movie industry.
Yeah, I mean, he's in USC, so right in Hollywood, right? And So think of it as a working studio. It's still working studios today, right? So if you want to get a job being a laborer, a carpenter, a grip, someone who's pulling scenes and pulling materials for scenes, that's how he started, background. And he even uses the name Duke Morrison. So he's not even using the moniker John Wayne yet. And that's how he gets his start. And he starts with John Ford, who will become a huge mentor to him and director that he works with throughout his career. And it's John Ford who takes a notice of him. He won't use him again as a main character until Stagecoach is probably where he gets his big notoriety as the Ringo Kid. But yes, so John Wayne is getting his roots started in Hollywood. And we're Californians. I would consider you a Californian. I'm not a Californian, but I married you in California, and we had all of our children in California. You are a true Californian, and you're born in SoCal and raised in SoCal. Your great-grandfather was part of the movie industry. He was a lead prop master, and we needed to get back out there to make more videos. We just haven't had a chance to get out to Hollywood.
Right.
area.
But you recently got a chance, and that's why we're talking about John Wayne today, because we just made a video from his gravesite, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But you got the opportunity to go out there. So what came up that gave you this opportunity?
I was selected as a pinup for vets calendar girl. So this calendar it's a nonprofit to support VA hospitals and veteran medical care. And every girl in the calendar is a veteran. And I was selected to be a part of the calendar this year. So if you need to get your calendar, it's Pinup for Vets.
We'll have a link in the show notes.
.com. But yeah, and like I said, it's a nonprofit. You buy the calendar. I'm supposed to be Miss October because I'm the only Navy veteran they have in the whole calendar. October is the Navy birth month. And so I flew out to LA to do this photo shoot, 2 days in Manhattan Beach. And you and we have big wish lists of things we want to film and do for the channel. And we keep them in our back burner. If we ever make it out to here. And I would say these wish list items are based on time. How much time, if I have a day in LA, I'm doing this. If I have 2 days in LA, I'm doing this. If I have a week in LA, I'm going to hit this. This was like, I have 1 day in LA. So our two big things for 1 day in LA was John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart.
Right.
So I'm so excited that I got to see John Wayne.
And you've talked about that for quite some time, because if you listen to the podcast for any period of time, or if you've watched our channel for any period of time, we've done many Jimmy Stewart videos. We've done many John Wayne videos. So you know that they are favorites here on the channel. So for you to get out there, and the funny thing is, in the video, right, and I will leave a link to the video in the podcast show notes. In the video, I don't remember if it's John Wayne or Jimmy Stewart, but there's so many famous people that are buried not far from either of these men.
I would say that Jimmy Stewart is in a more famous celebrity area. John Wayne is more south. He's in Corona Del Mar. But a very famous person has just been buried in that cemetery, Kobe Bryant.
Oh, really?
So now John Wayne shares the same cemetery with Kobe Bryant.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So that has made his cemetery. Now he's there with a lot of like B-list actors, and I hit one actress that is important to me there, but it's a lot of like old Hollywood.
Yeah.
But now that Kobe Bryant is there, I notice there's a lot of people visiting the cemetery to visit him.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And the Jimmy Stewart one, that'll be our next podcast episode. There's famous people there. I think you said Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable. So all like the uber famous Hollywood figure. We'll talk a little bit more about also one of the things that you talked about, because it was Memorial Day. But why don't you take us through a little bit of John Wayne's career and then how his involvement with the military before we get to the end of his career?
Sure. John Wayne, he starts out he's born Marion Robert Morrison, May 26th, 1907 in Winterset, Iowa. And we go there. We go to the house that he's born in. His museum is right there beside it. We spent the day in Winterset, Iowa. It's a great little town.
Yeah, off the beaten path.
Off the beaten path. I did not know it's also where the Bridges of Madison County is set and filmed as well. But it's really a cute little iconic town that he is from. But quickly he moves to the Hollywood area, to California. So his father was a pharmacist,
Yeah.
I guess, for lack of a
Like
better
owned
term.
a drugstore.
Yeah, owned a drugstore. And so they moved to California in 1916. So he's not even 10 years old. And he sets up a pharmacy in Glendale. So it's really, he goes to Glendale High School, and that's where he gets the scholarship to USC. So he really is someone I would think who grew up in California.
Yeah, he'd probably call himself a Californian.
Mm-hmm. And again, he calls himself Duke because his dog's name was Duke.
Yeah, his childhood dog's name was Duke. And I think, if I remember correctly, he was always walking by like a fire station where he lived, and the firemen would say that.
Yeah.
They're like, "Oh, look, there's little Duke," or something like that. Yeah.
So he's playing for USC football. He gets injured. He injures his knee, but he also has a shoulder injury. So he has 2 injuries, which as a football player, common injuries, also career-ending injuries. So that's what happens to him. And as a favor to the coach, he had given like one of the silent film stars tickets to a USC game at Movie Star, hires Wayne as a prop boy. So it's like the whole USC movie industry is helping each other out.
I mean, he's living in that area. You're near the industry. And naturally, if he's not playing football, he's got to earn his way. He's got to work. And that's where he starts working.
Exactly. So he starts as a prop boy, as an extra, like I said, and he's just big, right? I mean, imagine he's playing football.
And he was incredibly handsome when he was young. I found some pictures that I hadn't seen before, and I was like, good grief, no wonder they spotted this guy.
Exactly. Like, he's just a big guy. He has a presence about him. He's good looking. He has a strong face, strong chin. And so he starts to work as a minor, uncredited roles in a lot of movies in the 1920s, just small bit parts and small bit movies. It's while he's working there that he starts with that Duke Morrison name, because Marion Morrison, it's like, oh, it's Marion.
Not a manly name back then. I mean, and I think it was the studio executives that kind of tried to get him to get a stage name like that.
Exactly. But it was in 1930 when he was moving studio furniture as a prop boy that he was cast as his first starring role in The Big Trail. And that's when, for a screen name, he suggested, the director suggested Anthony Wayne after the Revolutionary War general Mad Anthony Wayne. But they felt it sounded too Italian, so suggested John Wayne. John is very basic, and so that's how he gets the name John Wayne.
It's so interesting that someone as famous as him now, you look back on that, and it was just like we need something simple.
Yeah, and the story is that John Wayne wasn't even present for that conversation. It was a conversation between the studio chief and the director.
That's wild.
So it was like, let's change his name so it's more marketable. And so John Wayne just took it. His pay was raised to $100 a week when he got that name. So Big Trail was a minor success. And again, he's just larger than life. And he's really portraying this big character. And I think people are getting this sense he's in these big sceneries, these big Western sceneries. He fills the screen with his presence, with this big background behind him.
And he just stands out, right? I remember seeing clips from that movie when I was putting one of our videos together, and he just stands out, even though obviously he was one of the main characters in the movie, so that was intentional by the filmmaker's part. He's just a little bit different. Right. And he's so young, and he's so much bigger than a lot of the men that are around him acting. And it's a lot of times, especially Hollywood nowadays, you get actors that are shorter. You can kind of, if you look for it, you can tell when they're putting, shorter male actors with taller female actresses on books, or kind of the way they film it. They don't have to worry about that with John Wayne. Like, he's athletic, he's good looking, he's big, right? He fits the part.
And I think he did a lot of Westerns in the 1930s here. And you're going to see like this kind of builds his Western persona. A lot of actors can get lost in a huge background, right? The majestic background of Monument Valley or the majestic background of a ranch. And John Wayne doesn't ever get lost in the background. He fills the background. Like he's part of it. And I think as as you're watching a film, you gravitate towards him. He doesn't just become part of the scenery. And I think people notice that right away. His next major role will be in 1939. So this came out in 1930, this first big trail. And then so 9 years later, he's been making Westerns the whole time, building his leading man persona. But it was 1939 that John Ford's Stagecoach, where he plays the Ringo Kid, and it kind of like the camera zero ins on him. You even hear directors, I think it was Spielberg or Scorsese, who was like that moment for them was understanding movie magic, right? How you're taking this character and making him larger than life. John Wayne was that persona. And again, this is John Ford. This is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, right? Which they will have for the rest of their lives, making movies together. But John Wayne is just really becoming the movie star, John Wayne.
Yeah, the hero, the classic hero of lore, per se.
So then we're going to get, this is 1939. America's going to enter World War II. What we talk about a little bit in this video, open up with John Wayne service.
Yeah, and we talk about that because one of the reasons I think that you addressed it when you went to make the video at the cemetery is because we get all sorts of comments across all of our videos, but there's some John Wayne haters out there. Yes. And a lot of times when we post either like a short, a reel, one of the videos, the haters will jump in and they'll say John Wayne was a draft dodger, John Wayne never served, and they're denigrating him. Now those are few and far between, to be honest, for John Wayne. The vast majority of the comments we get, people love watching John Wayne and watching stuff about John Wayne, but there's kind of a little bit of a perception of that, and that's something that you wanted to address while you were there, because you were there on Memorial Day. I
was there on Memorial Day. I do believe John Wayne did a service to his country in the way he portrays military people. He's portrayed military. I can't even say how many times he's portrayed a veteran or someone in the military in the movies. And the storytelling he has done from a person of military experience has really given a voice to so many military people and given them like a identity and the way people see them. And he's really painted them in a great picture. He's done it for every war, I would say.
Think about it. Sansa Iwo Jima.
Right.
I mean, there's all sorts
soldiers. Portraying Civil War. He's portraying World War II. He's portraying Vietnam. Like he's hitting the wars. He's doing Alamo. Like he's really hitting all these people of service. Now, he didn't serve. He tried to serve. And there were a couple reasons why he didn't serve. And it always was a very sore point for John Wayne because he felt like he should have served. I think he felt guilty that he didn't serve. But he was already rejected. He's what they call a 4F. So when you are put into the draft, you're given a rating based on your physical standard and your financial standard, your emotional standard, all these things.
Think about if you're a little bit younger in our audience, if you ever watched Captain America, the very first one, you remember he keeps pump him up or whatever like that. Everybody's getting 1A, which is the one that you accepted in the draft, and then you can go. But Steve Rogers, Captain America, before he's Captain America, can't.
Yes.
Because he's tiny, he's too small, he's got flat feet, he's got all these issues.
Yes. So there's certain things the military is looking for. You have to meet a height and weight standard. That's what he's not hitting in Captain America. He doesn't. He's too low weight. What does that mean? Too low weight to die for your country? No, too low weight to carry the gear needed day in, day out to be a soldier. You can't physically do it. Now, John Wayne's 4F was for a couple reasons. His injuries came back to haunt him, the shoulder and the knee. So already you're at a physical disability. They don't want to put you in military gear when you already have these physical ailments that you can't be 100%. and he has 4 children at the time.
And I think age was a thing too, right?
And age was a thing. Age you could get waivers for, but the 4 kids and then taking a military pay, so the huge pay cut, would put him in financial distress.
Because if you think about it, by the time that America's entering the war, he's in his mid-30s. If I'm remembering correctly. So
he's 34 at the time of Pearl.
So he's 34, probably 35 by the time he's trying to see if he can sign up. So that's a bit further along than most men who were joining in the war. Now, not all of them.
Sure.
But he is farther along in life. 4 kids, this huge career, already injured. So he had all these things already stacked up against him.
So usually they wanted you 18 to 30. So he's 34. And it's not too old if you're an officer, but remember, John Wayne didn't finish USC. So when we talk about enlisted and officers, you have to have a college degree to be an officer. So John Wayne would have to enlist. So enlistments 18 to 30 because they want the kids right out of college or right out of high school. And then his family status, he's classified, it's 3A when you have a family deferment, which means you have too many children. Your pay that you would make as a E1 would put you in a financial distress, hardship. Now, he tries to enlist. He tries to serve under John Ford, the director who he loves. John Ford serves in the military in a capacity where some other directors did as well. Frank Capra, they took footage of the war. They made propaganda movies, but they also just were documenting the war, and they did a very good job.
John Ford was at Midway.
Yeah, I mean, they go right into the heat of the battle.
Oh, yeah.
To capture it all. And so John Wayne tried to join with him, and they really did tried to get there and try to be a part of it. But every time something happened and he couldn't get the paperwork through. So he tried, but unfortunately he never got to serve. He stayed home. He made movies at home. But it wasn't for lack of trying. It wasn't for lack of want. It wasn't like he was people say a draft dodger. He wasn't any of those things. He unfortunately had age working against him, injury working against him, and he had too many kids.
Yeah. And I appreciated you addressing that because we've talked about John Wayne so much. That's one of the few things that we've never really had an opportunity to talk about. And I think that was appropriate on a day like Memorial Day, where we're able to address a lot of those comments that we get in our videos. So it was fun for you to get there and to be able to talk about that, and then for us today to talk a little bit more about his career.
Yeah, I want people to know John Wayne toured U.S. hospitals during the war. John Wayne did a lot for the USO during the war. John Wayne continued to be an advocate for the United States military up until his death. He was not a draft dodger. It wasn't like he didn't agree with the war. It wasn't like he didn't agree with fighting. He was all in on all of those things. Unfortunately, he just couldn't get in. And the archives, the U.S. archives, have found applications from John Wayne trying to get in.
Oh, really?
And every time they just were ultimately unsuccessful. So he did his best. And I give him a lot of credit, but I honor his service. I leave a flag for him because his portrayal, which is what we love actors for, is their portrayal of telling the story of military men. And to me, he just does that so well in so many movies. I love my favorite movie, right? The Searchers. Like, he's playing a Civil War veteran. So he just does a really great job, in my opinion, of portraying service members on screen. And I think he should be honored for that service that he gave to his country.
Yeah, I thought it was neat to be able to talk about that. And I was looking forward to talking about the ways in which he served, because not everybody can serve. And us, both of us, you having a veteran, me still serving, we get people all the time that tell us, whether we interview them on the podcast or we talk to them out in town, they'll say, I always wanted to serve. I always wish I would have. And by a certain time, I was too late in life. And there's people out there, you can still support your country. You can still support service in a different way. So I thought that was great to be able to talk about.
Absolutely.
Now let's go past that into kind of really what is like more the peak and then the kind of golden years of his career. So Monument Valley stretched before me, its stark beauty both familiar and alien. Here I was again, dust clinging to my sweat-dampened brow, years after the Wyoming winds had whipped my face on the big trail. This time, 1956, I was a seasoned set supervisor on John Ford's latest, The Searchers. John Wayne, or Duke as everyone still affectionately called him, wasn't the same young buck with a twinkle in his eye I remembered. The years had etched canyons into his face, mirroring the ones around us. But the fire that burned in him back then hadn't entirely died. It had transformed. A quiet intensity simmered beneath the surface. This film felt different. There was a rawness to it, a complexity that went beyond the usual good versus bad tropes of Westerns. Director John Ford pushed Duke, demanding a depth I hadn't seen before. The character, Ethan Edwards, a Civil War veteran searching for his kidnapped niece, was a man haunted by prejudice and a thirst for vengeance.
Don't call me uncle. I ain't your uncle.
Yes, sir.
No need to call me sir either.
What do you want me to call you?
Name's Ethan.
It was a far cry from clear-cut heroes Duke usually portrayed. During filming, there were long stretches of silence, broken only by the creak of saddles and the whistle of the wind. In those moments, I'd steal a glance at Duke. His face, usually an open book, was a mask of conflicted emotions. Anger, regret, a flicker of something that might have been love. It was a performance unlike anything I'd witnessed, a raw vulnerability that resonated deeply.
Why don't you finish the job?
What good did that do you?
By what you preach, none.
We all knew Ford was a visionary director, but on this set, there was a different kind of electricity. There was a sense that we were creating something special, something that transcended the genre. Little did we know, The Searchers would become a landmark film, forever changing the Western landscape. It would spark debate, challenge audiences, and force them to confront the dark corners of the American mythos. As filming wrapped, a strange melancholy hung in the air. We'd poured our heart and souls into this project, and part of us knew it wouldn't be easily replicated. As I shook Duke's hand, his grip firm despite the years, I saw a flicker of that old fire in his eyes. But this time, it was tinged with a quiet satisfaction, a sense of a job well done. He might not have known it then, but The Searchers would become a defining moment in his career. A testament to his ability to push beyond the limitations of the Western hero and deliver a performance that resonated with audience for generations to come. It was a far cry from the young wrangler I met in Wyoming, but it was the culmination of a remarkable journey, a journey I was privileged to witness. I mean, he really starts hitting his true movie stardom stride, I'd say, in those 40s, 50s, and then 60s, on the back end.
Yeah, I would say we both feel like he made his two best movies. Now, again, this is just our idea of his best. If you want to see our top 10 John Wayne and why we consider them the top 10, please find the Walk with History episode.
You can find it on our channel. I'll put it in the show notes as well.
But I think he hits his stride in his 40s. I think when you think of The Quiet Man and The Searchers, they're made within 5 years of each other, where he's 45 to 49. And I think that's where he's really hitting his stride. Quiet Man is 1952 and The Searchers is 1956. And again, these are John Ford movies, but I think this is when he's really hitting his leading man status. He's being able to pull an entire movie on his own.
I mean, his name on the movie poster, his name on the billboard is the draw.
Is the draw. 100%. So much so that he's going to ride that out for his career, right? And so when you watch The Longest Day, he's just one of the many actors, but John Wayne is listed on the I'm going to watch that. John Wayne's in it.
And I think he directed The Alamo. Yes. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And I remember reading when we visited the John Wayne Museum in Winterset, it said the studio executives only allowed him to direct The Alamo if he would star in it and he would put his name as one of the leading roles.
Yep.
That's the only way they would let him do it, because they knew his name on a movie brought people in.
He's bankable. He's a leading star. He's a leading man. I think even today he's in the top 5 leading men of all time. So he's just a very bankable actor. He made a lot of movies. He turned them out quickly, and he was really great. Now, you get the criticism that John Wayne doesn't really change character too much from movie to movie. He's playing basically the same kind of hard man who has been run through the ringer and is doing he's reaching some kind of arc, right?
And I think there's some truth to that. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But that's also the era. The era was Westerns. The era was the era of big leading men that went in and won the fight almost every single time. Yeah. But then as his career progressed, you actually saw him change that character, whether it's in The Cowboys or whether it's in True Grit or whether it's in, his last movie, The Shootist, where he's playing that character that is vulnerable at times in the movie, and that's what really draws you into the character. And he didn't do that quite as much early in his career, but then he's still playing these big, I can win any fight and do anything. But then there's these moments of true vulnerability, right? I think he was only killed in a movie a couple times, right? The Cowboys is one of the most famous ones, and Bruce Dern, it followed him around for forever. But when you get to The Shootist, and he's sitting there talking with Jimmy Stewart, and it's the end of his career, and Jimmy Stewart is giving him the news that nobody wants to hear, which you will hear the kind of the vignette here in just a little bit, because that's what I put in there. But that's him playing almost himself. Him, not John Wayne, not the Duke, but Marion Morrison at the end of his time through his movie career, admitting that vulnerability and admitting, it's just like he doesn't say it, but you want him to say, I thought I was going to live forever. And that, I think he captures really well towards the end of his career. And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed, and I enjoy talking about John Wayne, because you see that true arc from the strapping young 20-year-old who can do anything to now he's in his he was probably 70 something when he made The Shootist, maybe late 60s, and
he dies at 72.
Yeah,
I think he made The Shootist in 77, so he was 70.
Yeah,
and I think again you see that like in The Cowboys, and you're seeing that later in life he's choosing these roles where he can be a little bit more vulnerable and show you that vulnerability and do it in a way that really makes you understand and believe that the human nature of people, even the human nature of people we think of heroes. And that, I think, is the greatest example he gives to the military, and in his service to his country is showing that anyone who is willing to serve their country is a hero. And I think John Wayne does a good job of showing that with these really vulnerable characters who really do these noble things, even though they have a flawed life or they don't live the best picturesque life in the end. In The Shootist, he's even proud, I think, in the end, to give that advice, leave that advice on, like kind of mentor a young Ron Howard.
Yeah, his character.
But I think he's almost mentoring a country. He's mentoring the people, because we've grown up with John Wayne. He took us through the war. He took us through Vietnam. He took us through history. We've learned a lot about history from John Wayne, and he's taken us through really the birth of cinema to what cinema ended up being when he left. And so that's like a lot of growing. And I think he wanted to hand it off with this understanding that I did my best, but I'm only human.
Yeah, he had an amazing 40-plus year career. He's just one of the all-time greats.
So to be able to visit his grave was always a bucket list thing for me. I knew it was in Corona Del Mar. That's Orange County, California. That's south of LA. I knew it was on the water. John Wayne was big. He had his boat, the Wild Goose. It was like an old minesweeper
really?
that he would take to Catalina all the time.
That's funny.
And so I know he wanted to kind of like see the water. And so if you sit at his grave, you can see the Pacific Ocean, which is very beautiful. Pacific View Memorial Park, where he's buried, was opened in 1958. So John Wayne dies in 1979. So really 20 years it had been open. When I visited his grave, it's a very unassuming grave. A lot of them are flat graves. Usually it makes it easier for them for maintenance of the lawn. But it has a cowboy on it. Looks like Monument Valley in the background. And it has his name, his moniker, John Wayne. Does not have his birth name. There's no Marion Morrison on there. The dates of the year dates of birth and death, 1907, 1979. And then a quote that has been attributed to John Wayne from an interview that he gave, that tomorrow always comes in perfect and clean and beautiful and ready for and it's up to you for what you do with it, which I really always appreciated. That what he's telling you is it's up to you. Your dreams are yours, your aspirations are yours, and everybody gets the same amount of time, and what they do with it is completely up to them. And so I think it's very much like a dream big quote, and that is who John Wayne was. I love these huge actors who came from nothing. John Wayne's one of them, Jimmy Stewart. No family. There was no one in the industry. No one gave them, there was no nepotism, right? There was no one giving them a handout. Like, they just did it, and they wrote the book along the way. And John Wayne is really one of them. And so it was just a real honor for me to be there. I did say at the time that I don't think any other family members are around him. Since then, I've looked up his daughter, his first wife. They're close by. They're not beside him, but they're close by where he is. So he's not alone there. He was married twice, and he has 7 kids. I think he's had 3 children who have since passed, and I think 2 of them are there, but not on the same row, but close by. So he's not alone. He does have some family close by. But it is a beautiful location, and it was just a real honor to visit him.
Yeah. It's 1977, and the flickering light of the television cast a mosaic of shadows in my living room walls. The Shootist played on, John Wayne's face filling the screen.
How'd you ever kill so many men?
Lived most of my life in the wild country. You set a code of laws to live by.
What laws?
I won't be wronged. I won't be insulted. I won't be laid a hand on. I don't do these things to other people. I require the same from them.
It wasn't the same Duke I remembered from Monument Valley all those years ago. Age had finally etched its story onto his features, but his eyes still held that glint, a defiance against the inevitable. A pang of grief hit me. John Wayne, the Duke, the larger-than-life figure who dominated Westerns for decades, was gone. News of his death had hit me hard, a reminder of my own mortality, my own fading memories. As I watched him on screen, a gunslinger facing down his final showdown, memories flooded back. The Wyoming wind whipping at our faces, the camaraderie on the set of The Big Trail, the quiet intensity he brought to Ethan Edwards in The Searchers, a role that, I now realized, laid bare the complexities of the American West. John Wayne wasn't just an actor, he was an icon. He embodied a certain kind of American spirit, rugged, self-reliant, a man of action who stood his ground. Some might scoff, call it simplistic, but it resonated with audiences. He was the hero who rode in, restored order, and rode off into the sunset. A comforting fantasy in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. The Shootist felt different. It was a poignant farewell, a reflection on a fading era. John Wayne, the aging gunslinger, knew his time was up, but he faced his end with dignity, a final act of defiance against the inevitable.
Oh, what can you do?
There's just very little I can do. When the pain gets too bad, I can give you something.
What you're trying to tell me is that
I'm sorry, Bogus.
You told me I was strong as an ox.
Well, even an ox dies.
The movie ended, the credits rolling in silence. I sat there, the quiet hum of the television filling the room. John Wayne was gone, but the legacy he left behind would endure. He'd captured a time, a spirit, and etched it into the silver screen. He was a reminder of simpler times, a storyteller who wove tales of the Wild West, a man who, for a fleeting moment, allowed us to believe in heroes. As I switched off the TV, the image of a young John Wayne, full of fire and dreams, flickered in my mind. A bittersweet smile touched my lips. It was a long road from the Wyoming plains to Monument Valley, and finally to this quiet farewell. But one thing remained certain. John Wayne, the Duke, would forever be a part of American cinema, a testament to a bygone era and the enduring power of a well-told story. Thank you for listening to the Talk with History podcast, and please reach out to us at our website, talkwithhistory.com. But more importantly, if you know someone else that might enjoy this podcast, please share it with them, especially if you think today's topic on John Wayne would interest a friend. Shoot them a text and tell them to look us up. We rely on you, our community, to grow, and we appreciate you all every day. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.